So our first presenter is Phil Nash from Twilio, and he will be telling us about service workers. Give it up for Phil!
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you everyone for coming, and sorry for those who are sat at the back there on the floor. I'm terribly sorry about that. But I did spot one person who brought their own chair in. That was incredibly smart. Good work by them. Good afternoon and thank you. This is a great conference so far. I'm really excited. It's been a great 3 talks to get things kicked off, and now we're going to head, I guess, into a little bit more technical times. But before we do, let me just introduce myself. There we go. We have some slides. My name is FALLBACKS. I'm a developer evangelist for a company called Twilio. Who here has heard of Twilio before? A lot of people. Cool. Some hands who weren't up does mean I get to describe what we do. We are a communications platform for your applications. To communicate with your users via voice, video, or messaging using the tools, languages, or frameworks that you already know. We're not here to talk about Twilio this afternoon, but it is going to feature a little in my demos just because that's the kind of thing I tend to build. But we are here to talk about service workers. And again, who's heard of service workers already? I guess you have because you've turned up. So 3 people have heard. Okay, cool. Have you tried using them before? Yeah, all right, and they're quite fun, right? For anybody else, I just have a brief introduction to them, which is that service workers are scripts, JavaScript, that intercept network requests. So the web developers, like ourselves, can treat the network as an enhancement and provide offline experiences for users of web applications. Make sense? Cool, let's go get beer. It's a great talk, I don't know. It's fine. There's obviously more to it than that, and I'm looking to cover that as best I can in the next 28 minutes, according to the lovely clock I have down in front of me. So let's go into that slightly longer introduction to service workers. Because I believe, and I wrote this in the abstract for this talk, that the service worker is the new XMLHttpRequest. Now I don't mean that it's got a ridiculous name which has all the wrong capitalization in it. I don't mean it's got a horrible API that you wish you never had to use, and very glad that there's libraries and things to cover that. What I mean is that the XMLHttpRequest, that first time that we were allowed, we have the ability to make a call on a page off to another network resource and return that and never have to refresh the page, was just a watershed moment for web applications, right? When the Outlook Online team, I believe it was, talked the Internet Explorer 5 team into allowing them to do this, admittedly with an ActiveX object. It was that turning point for the for interactive applications that we wanted to use. And this is just, right now I don't think we could believe or we could imagine a web that didn't have XMLHttpRequest and that ability to make interactive applications much better. And to me, I think that in future we will wonder how we cope without service workers, much like we wonder how what we'd have built an XMLHttpRequest without that. So let's look at a little bit of history, because this is not the first thing we've had on the web that allows us to make an offline experience happen. Who recognizes this particular feature, the application cache? This was our first go-around at implementing offline ability. It's a declarative format. You just tell the browser, I want this style sheet, I want this JavaScript saved offline. That kind of made sense, right? Except many people who did a lot of work with this, who built applications that depended on the application cache and other things like local storage, found that it was just not quite the feature that they wanted. Jake Archibald of Google famously has said many times in articles, talks, and probably if you stopped him on the street, that the application cache is douchebag. And it really was, because for one thing, the first time you ever install an application cache, if you did this, but without caching anything, and then link that in your HTML, it would break everything, because it wouldn't allow anything through to the network. That's a bad experience. It's a bad experience when we implement something like this. And then once you actually had to deal with fallbacks, network requests, and the things in the cache, everything just fell apart. So it had to be taken out back and killed. It's not quite dead yet, but it is deprecated, the application cache, and Mozilla have already published their intent to remove the application cache from Firefox, so it's definitely going away. In the meantime, at the start of 2014, Jake Archibald, along with Alex Russell at Google, started the service worker spec. And that's just the link to that spec. It's quite an interesting read. It's actually fairly readable for a spec. Most, obviously, specs are kind of for implementers of this, but it's also interesting to from that point of view as a web developer. And just a year later, at the start of 2015, was the first time we saw the service worker appear in publicly available browsers. So in parts of 2014, it was behind a flag set in Chrome. But with the advent of Chrome 40 and Opera 27 back at the start of 2015, we suddenly got this first go at service workers for the public. And since then, the start of this year, Firefox 44 dropped in support for service workers. And we also have this nice new logo, which is the Samsung Internet Browser, available on Samsung phones, which might sound like a small browser, but actually apparently takes up 10% of mobile traffic on Android. So it's actually a relatively significant thing because it's the default browser on Samsung devices these days. However, it's based off of Chromium and it is moving forward along with the rest of them. So it supports this stuff, and we can be happy about that. The only thing we have to be sad about is the fact that we need a Samsung device in order to test on this, so I never have. I'll try and find their team and talk them into either giving me one or making it better for testing. But just to be safe, this is one we need to think about, I think, now, because it's available on many, many devices. The other ones? Not as bad as it sounds, because Edge have actually got this into preview now. The latest preview builds of Edge have service workers hidden behind a flag. So they've been working on it, and it is in preview, which is super exciting. Safari are thinking about it. And you might think they never come up with this kind of thing, and they're very slow about it, but actually I believe there are some indicators that they are going to bring this into WebKit, into Safari. Because just recently in WebKit previews, the Fetch API, which is the new XMLHttpRequest, the actual one that makes requests, has just landed in preview, and that's part of service workers. It comes along with promises and other support for that. And secondly, I think an interesting indicator of this is that coming out next week with iOS 10 will be Apple Pay for the web. And so if you're worried that Apple wouldn't want to encourage better web applications because they'll lose money on that, they are now going to make money on the web as well. So hopefully, these kind of things mean we're going to see this. So what does it really do? Let's see some code. Service worker requires installation. It's a JavaScript file that's going to run outside of the context of your web page. So we need to register it with the page and with the browser so that it's ready for that. And as I said, it comes with promises. Scopes. You can scope it to a particular path so that you can use different service workers at different parts of the page, and so that when different pages request from different places, you can deal with that. If you don't want to do that, it's fine. The default scope is where the service worker file itself sits, so this would be under the root path. And service workers come with promises, so when the registration of the service worker succeeds, we will resolve that promise successfully, fulfill it. And if it doesn't succeed, we can catch that and carry on. And this is a key, an important point, like maybe the service worker doesn't install properly. This should not cause us any problems, because the service worker, one, isn't available in all those browsers, in some browsers, and secondly, it is an enhancement. It is a way to make the web work better. And so if it doesn't work, the user will just receive a normal web page, and that should be fine. And then it accepts network requests. So inside the service worker file itself, you basically have to listen for events. The fetch event is a network request made from your page. It can be to any local resources, and also remote resources as well, so you can actually intercept all of those requests. And so it's a proxy, basically, that you're in control of, which might be a little bit worrying, because if somebody were to take over and install a service worker for you, you may never see your user again, because you'll never get them to, a malicious service worker could never let any traffic back to your site again, and you'll never know about it because you just won't hear about it. Thankfully, that has been thought of, and firstly, service workers have to be, can only be installed on a secure domain, so you can't man in the middle of this, you can't put things in the way. They have to be on HTTPS. This, would have been a difficult thing in the past, but with projects like Let's Encrypt, if you've heard of that at all, getting an SSL certificate is a lot easier, renewing SSL certificates are a lot easier, and HTTPS for all. In fact, actually, with the next version of Chrome that is coming out, I think version 53, they're starting to very clearly mark plain HTTP sites as non-secure, very, very clearly in the browser URL bar. get on HTTPS. And then when you're developing, localhost is fine, that is deemed a secure domain, so we don't have to install SSL on our actual laptops and mess about with web servers like that. We can just get on with things, which is cool. So I want to just jump in very quickly to show you a very quick demo of actually how it works. I have a very simple page right here. It does not work offline right now. This is just an HTML page and CSS page being served up, and I get a fake offlineness by killing the server, and it doesn't work. So let's put it back on and install ourselves a service worker. This is my page. As you can see, it's like a bootstrap theme because I'm not a designer. I can't make anything look nice. That's about the best I can do. Let's just install this. So, as I said, you just have to register the service worker. It lives on the navigator object and returns promises when things work. And you get a registration object in this, but I'm not going to use that right now. This is just a little logging to make sure that things are indeed working for me. And if things weren't working, we could show the error. Obviously, if you were doing this yourselves, you probably want to make a check to see if the service worker actually exists by seeing if it exists in the navigator object. But right now, that's all we need to do to get things installed. In fact, it can be even simpler than that. You can do it in, starting with Chrome 54, actually it's behind a flag, but you'll be able to do it with either a link tag in the head or a link header sent from the server. Obviously, you don't get to log the results of that, but it's just a very simple declarative way of doing that. And then inside our service worker, I briefly showed you the fetch thing before, but we actually we have other events which we can listen to. And the first of which, the most important to get started with, is the install event. Because this one fires when we download the service worker the first time, and it moves into the state of installing, and we get this event, and we can do stuff with it. And we can tell the event that we want to do stuff with it. Because the service worker, since it lives in the background, can be killed at any time by the browser. Unless it specifically says, hey, don't kill me right now. And that's what event.waitUntil gives you. This is an extendable event object, and waitUntil takes a promise and will return and allow the service worker to be killed only once a promise that is passed to it is fulfilled, or rejected, once it's entirely resolved. So with that, we're going to then use the caches API. Caches API is part of the service worker, but it is available in the page JavaScript as well. And if you find me talking about the front end at any point during this talk, I mean the actual HTML page and that kind of front end. The back end of the server, and then I end up talking about the service worker as a middle end, which makes no sense, but if you catch me saying that, that's what I mean. The service worker is the middle end. And so we're just going to open up a cache, and that actually returns a promise, so that's fine. And when we get that promise resolved, we'll resolve with a cache. And if that cache doesn't exist, that refresh cache there doesn't exist, it will be created. So this promise will probably resolve every time. And with that cache, we can then return an event. We can add some things to the cache. In this case, I'm going to use add all, although it's just add for single files, but add all will give us the ability to add, say, our index.html and our app.css file. And I know app is quite a grand title for the CSS of this page, but that's what I called it. And when add all resolves successfully, then that will return. And if it does not resolve successfully, that will fail, and none of the things will be in the cache, and the installation of the service worker will also fail, and it will carry on using it like an existing web application. So that's what we need to install and cache our files to start with. But we also need to then do stuff with them. And this is where that fetch comes in. This gives us a bit more stuff to deal with. Because we don't want to wait this time, that's not what we're here for. We actually want to send back a response, and so we use the respond with function of this extendable event. And in this, we want to return one of those things we've cached. But we can just return a new response object. So response objects are what we're going to build out of this. And we can build one ourselves just like that. It will be a very boring web page if we did that, because it would just say hello and then not make any more requests. So actually we're just going to open up our cache again. Cache is .open. I'm going to call it refresh. And when we have that cache, we can return the match of the request that we were after. So that's actually on the event object. Event XMLHttpRequest. So that will include things, anything on the request, like query parameters and things like that. And we return that. And in the case of this application, which only has two files that we know are in the cache already because we installed them correctly up here, that's all we need to do. We can catch errors with matching things, or if we don't match anything, we can then reach out to the network if we want to. But in this case, that's all we need. So I'm going to just refresh that. And if you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, that's the Chrome Canary DevTools, and that shows that we've activated and installed a service worker. Let's look at that. Oops. It's activated and running, and that means I can just go ahead and kill this thing right now. And if I try and refresh my page now, we still get it because it's reaching into the cache, and it never bothers asking the server if it exists, which is kind of cool. And we can see that cache storage. It's called refresh. It's down here, and here are those two files that we cached as well. So that is very much the first thing you ever want to do with a service worker: cache some things offline and see it work. And so that's that. But you might ask them why at this point. Why would you want to do this? And I think it's down to a discussion between, an argument maybe between web and native applications. There are many ways you can discuss this, not all web applications should be native applications, not all native applications should actually be web applications, but we've always been a little bit on the back foot in some respects on the web, because we've always been online by default, forgetting about the application cache itself. We are online by default, which means every time we go in a browser to a URL, we're going to go and ask the network, what's here for me? The HTTP cache sometimes works in browsers, sometimes works for you to be offline, but for the most part, we're just going to ask for more details from the network. If that doesn't work, we get to see. If we're using Chrome, we get to play the dinosaur game, right? We get to jump up and down and run away from cactuses, jump over cactuses. And that's good. That's not cool. Whereas native applications have always had this ability to be offline by default. Once you go in to the App Store and download an application, you have all the files required to run the application. If you have a native application on your phone right now, which doesn't work if you're offline, that's the fault of the developer. They should be able to give you an experience. And if it crashes, that's the worst thing. But they should be able to give you an experience because they have all the files, they have everything they need. The web, on the other hand, has always had a wonderful, wonderful advantage, which is that it's discoverable and linkable. We have links, hrefs, the ability to point at places on the web and share with people, direct them there, and everything like that. Whereas native applications are gated by that App Store installation. In order to get yourself a native application, you have to come out of the browser if that's what you were doing, go to the App Store, search for it. Maybe you're linked into the App Store somewhere. You have to be signed into your App Store account or your Play account. You have to, you have to install it. And once you finally get all those files downloaded onto your device, depending on regardless of how big or how long that download takes, you then open up the application and it doesn't know who you are, it doesn't know what you were trying to do. The web will instantly know that because you were linked into a particular place. So that App Store installation, I think that's just a really bad experience to me. Now once you've got it, you then have this offline capability, you have the rest of what native applications give to you, but I just feel like that initial event is just, it just makes things difficult for people. So what if we changed that offline and that online by default? That one's gone blank. Okay. We'll carry on, it's all over here. If we change that, that online requirement from the web to be able to work offline first, and be able to give our users an offline experience regardless of the network conditions, regardless of the ability to have the network, then we can win as web developers and beat out most requirements needed to be a native application. And maybe you don't care about being offline, maybe that's not what you care about. And that's fine as well, because there are other reasons for this. I think performance is one of them. The fact that we can cache these things in a cache that we have control over, and that we know what's in and out of that cache, and we can read it and everything like that, just means that we have more control. We have more control over that experience, and we never have to reach the network if we don't want to, in order to get some of these static files, and we can deal. And we can also do things like return a blank bit of HTML to start with. A blank bit of HTML, sorry. The way people talk about it is the application shell the bits of an application that you'll see on screen every time, and you can fill that in with data afterwards, just bringing things to the device quicker and making that perceived load time much better. And there's also fallbacks. Like maybe you don't want to create an entire offline experience. However, if you do find yourself offline, if you do find yourself with a user who's offline or has a flaky connection, and you don't want them watching just like a white screen of loading or having to deal with that dinosaur, you want to be able to give them an experience, something to say, hey, don't worry, you're offline right now, we can deal with that, we'll sort it out later. Whilst you're waiting, here's something you can do, here's an experience you can have. And one team who's worked quite nicely on this so far is the Guardian developer team. And if you go onto Guardian and you will install a service worker, and they, if you go offline whilst trying to read it, they'll be like, all right, sorry, you can't connect right now, but how about a crossword? I think that's a really lovely experience. And because, if you're offline, you're not exactly going to go off to some other website and do something else, because you're offline. So they're going to keep you here, and once you return to being online, you can get back on with what you were doing. But you might have a bit of fun in the meantime. I think that's a nice experience. And then there's other stuff that doesn't even have anything to do with offline things at all. Service workers have brought about the advent of push notifications for the web. I'm going to show a quick demo of that right now, because I've been building a little kind of HTML-based SMS application. This wraps around the Twilio number, and when I send a text message to it, they come into this kind of conversation on screen. I'm just going to send one now. So what I'm going to do is just close that. That's kind of important part about these push notifications, is that I'm not currently on the website. I don't have it anywhere else. Like, there are no other windows of Chrome right now. I'm just going to say, hello refresh, send that in. And what I should get is a little pop-up notification in the top right of my screen, once it sends. My phone, there we go, saying, okay, cool. So we should see a little pop-up come up. No, that's good, my screen, isn't it? All right. Well, forget that one. I can show you a sort of demo of that, which is very much that. We are here in the application as a service worker. I can trigger a push notification, and that's the kind of thing we've seen. It's a little bit tiny up there because this can't be made bigger like the rest of the screen. But the important thing about that is that they do work when they work. They do work when you're not on the website. We have had the notification API in browsers for a number of years, except that Edge, which only just released it, which allows you to do notifications whilst you're on the page. But this means you can navigate away, you can close the tabs, and still receive those notifications. And on mobile, on Chrome, on Android, if you close the browser entirely, it will still receive push notifications because it's connected via Google Cloud Messenger in this particular case. And it works like any other Android application that can receive a notification even if the entire application is closed. So that's cool. Of course, so support for this actually is fairly good right now. It's been live since Chrome 42, Firefox 44, Opera 37, and Samsung Internet 4. So you can do it on all those 4 browsers, which is kind of cool. Obviously missing from the other ones at the moment, which is, they don't have any service workers yet, so. But, with great power does come great responsibility. And actually, if I just emulate a little push there, we can see there's a little cog. It's very tiny on the screen, but there's a little cog at the bottom which allows you to click that. You never have to visit the website in order to go and turn off notifications. So I can just go disallow them right here in my settings. So, be good with these things, because people can turn them off almost instantly. And then you lose your user, and you don't have any chance to re-engage them. We also have a background sync, and this is one of the things that is the least supported in browsers, but one of the ones I'm most excited about, because this does work with both online and offline experiences. And if I can just show you this one, what I'm actually going to do is turn my Wi-Fi off. Turn that off. And make sure I'm actually sharing personal hotspot. I was. Let's not do that. So my computer's all the way offline now, and so I'm just going to send myself a message. Hello from offline. I have my phone up on the screen here, so that's going to show up what happens there. And I can press send, and that's going to tell me it's sent. But we know it's not sent because we're not online. That's definitely not done anything. And maybe my interaction, my user interface could be slightly more clear about that, but I'm definitely not a designer. But what we can tell you, what we can see is that what I've done is stuffed that message just into IndexedDB here in the, so this is our offline asynchronous database. And that's our object there. And so if I now go back online, the browser, the service worker, has been told to wait for a sync event. A sync event happens when you return to be online. And when it does, it fires in the service worker. And, got a message, there we go. It fires in the service worker, and then it can go and do stuff about that. And so in this case, it's going to look into the IndexedDB. It's going to say, okay, what have we got there? We've got a message, and if I refresh that, because the dev tools are a bit wonky here, it will go in, it will find all the messages I meant to send whilst I was offline, and then send them, and then clear the database out. And so you can do anything like this. You can register for sync events on all sorts of things. I think it's particularly useful in a message sending case if you're building this SMS application or a forum or something like that. It's the kind of thing your user wants to send their message and then get on with their day. And they don't have to worry about whether it got sent. And so it can be sent later. And there we go. So that's background sync. And the support for that, as I said, was just Chrome 49 and above. But hopefully it's coming to a halt soon. Now, there was a bit of talk at one point about geofencing with this as well. I love the idea that the service worker could receive events when you stumble into a geofenced location. But that all went kind of quiet. So don't bank on this one coming up anytime soon. I think it's a nice idea, but it's all gone quiet there. But what this all leads us to, in the end, is actually the idea of progressive web applications. Have you heard this term before? Google are kind of pushing it quite a lot at the moment. A progressive web app is quite simple, really. It requires three things, basically. Service workers, and that implies HTTPS or secure origin. A manifest or JSON file, which can list out logos and other things, so we don't have to put a whole bunch of little tags in the head. And finally, some user engagement. Now, this is defined differently by browsers, and they're working on it. Sometimes it means just more than one interaction with a site, visiting on more than one occasion, things like that. But they're going to play with that, so we just have to have an engaging site that people might want to use as an app. And then we get app install banners. I don't have an Android device to show this on, so here's a screenshot. But if you use the app a few times, and the browser thinks, okay, the user might want to have this as an actual application, we get this pop-up saying you can add this to the home screen. This is a better experience than the previous way where users had to go through a menu to add something to the home screen and never did. And so you can get it popped up there as well. And then we get an icon on the home screen. It's like an entire native application, and then, eventually profit. I guess. Well, the marketing team's very happy. We never had to build a native application, but we live on the user device. And that's kind of exciting as well. And that's kind of the thing about service workers. They have this ability to bring us into this future of applications, all via progressive enhancement. And I really like that because, as I said, if none of this works, the application just works as a web application as usual. And so we don't have to worry about making different experiences. It's the same experience, just sometimes it's going to work offline. And so that was my introduction to service workers. They are scripts that intercept network requests so that web developers can treat the network as an enhancement. And I said provide offline experiences for users of web applications, but it's come to feel with me recently that actually it's not exactly the case. Because what we're actually going to do when we have this is provide better experiences for users. It doesn't matter whether they're online or offline, and we can make them more performant, we can have fallbacks, we can re-engage them with push notifications, we can let them do stuff without worrying about an internet connection and sync that stuff in the background. And that is a better experience for users. And that's why we should be using this. And finally, I said in the future we will wonder how we go without service workers. But if you're not convinced about that, I have this one last little video which might show you that. This does require sound. I did just plug that in because I realized I hadn't got it on, but this is a...
For too long, users have been left staring at a white screen. For too long, they've been let down by the cruel seas of network connectivity. And for too long, we've been powerless to help. We've been left waiting. But no longer. A new browser feature has arrived. essentially that lets you control the network rather than letting the network control you. Who is this new feature? And what promises does it bring? Introducing the service worker.
And so that's what happened when you let a bunch of Americans get all of this. So far. I hope you're excited about that too. Before I finish, just quickly, and I know I'm out of time, but I want to tell you very quickly, as I said at the start, I work for Twilio, and we are hosting a conference in just 2 weeks' time in London called Signal, where we're talking about the future of communications. I would love to see you there. If you do want to come along, please do. Just use the promo code PNASH20 and get 20% off those tickets. Come and find me and ask me about that later. Other than that, my name is Will Nash, I'm a developer evangelist for Twilio. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
Okay, thanks for this talk, Bill. So first of all, I have one question. Progressive enhancement and progressive web apps and service workers seem to be the latest hype. Everyone's talking about them. But do you see any downsides? Do you think they will be used wrong, or does it have any shortcomings? Where can it improve? Or what's your opinion on that?
I mean, just to start with, progressive enhancement shouldn't be a new hype thing. Like, that's the thing we should have been doing since forever, right? Since we had different features in different browsers, we just detect the features that we can use and go ahead and use them when we can. Progressive web apps and service workers, in terms of shortcomings, I mean, there are ways to abuse them, which the browser vendors themselves are kind of looking into and working with at the moment, so just watch out for that kind of thing. I'm not going to tell you how to abuse them in case you go and do that and fill up a user's cache, their entire phone with stuff. Don't do that. But other than that, I mean, there are certain deficiencies in some of the APIs. The fetch API, as I said, that will replace XMLHttpRequest, cannot currently be cancelled. So if you're like, I no longer need this network request, you can't stop it right now. There's not too much about it. Like, I'm excited about it. Like, it has this ability to, because we're no longer trying to define this offline stuff declaratively, we have all of the control that we have in JavaScript to deal with this. So I do obviously encourage you to work with it, use it, and try and break it in various ways. That's the only way these things get better. And if you do manage to do that, then contact the Chrome team, contact the team that's behind the spec, and just say, hey, what about this? And they're very responsive, very responsive, what a good word for it. They're very receptive to those kind of ideas and feedback. So either tell me, I'll tell them, or get in touch with somebody like Jake Archibald or Alex Russell online.
Okay, cool, thanks. Do we have any questions from the audience? Raise your hands and I will bring you the mic. Come on, at least one question. Okay, we have one.
Thank you so much.
Hey, so I'm wondering, since you can install service workers with JavaScript, it means that any page which has an XSS flow could do the same and then send you notifications and this kind of thing. So is there a way in Chrome to disable installing service workers
if you have JavaScript? You're saying you'd be able to cross-site script a notification?
Yeah.
So the notifications actually need to be sent via your server, from the server side. That's where the notification is generated. And so what happens in the push notification is you register for it, and it goes through a permissions dialog to say, do you want to receive notifications from this site? If the user says yes to that, then you receive back in the callback a URL, a unique URL for that user, which you then pass to your server side. And when you want to send that user a push notification, you just make a post request to that URL. If you want to send data with it, there's a bit more to do with encrypting the payload, which is good for security, etc. But to simply make a request happen, make a push notification happen, you have to do it using that unique URL on the server side. So that's not something that people can take over, and so it's very safe in that respect. And even more safe that we have to encrypt any data that we send over as well. That gets a bit more complicated, but the slides will be online, and there's actually some links to actually how you go and build background sync, how you go and build push notifications. So go check that out, and you should be able to discover stuff that way. Anybody else we have? a minute left on this clock, and I did run a little bit over. So. Oh, yes.
Hi. Are the actions saved in the background permanent, or can you set the time limit on them, or say that this action will invalidate when the browser is restarted, or something like that?
In the service worker itself, I don't think you can validate it. I mean, you can, and certainly not on browser restart, but I'm not sure why you would either. It does go through a full life cycle event. So we only saw, in this particular presentation, we only saw its like install and fetch events. But there is a full life cycle for you to be able to replace service workers and upgrade them and make them use different caches and cache down other stuff. And so I encourage you, and again, in the slides there is a link to an article which will go into depth on that life cycle. But no, you can't just make the service worker stop working. It's always going to intercept these network requests once it's installed, unless you change it for one that doesn't. The cache, I believe, has some timeouts and limits on it, so you can expire things out of the cache if you want to. Although I only learned that very recently, so I haven't probably looked into that yet.
Okay, so if I wanted to, and if the service is relying on it, I could just cancel my network connection, and the request would go into the background, and I could basically just delete it.
As a user?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's messing with your own stuff. I mean, yeah, you can, but you can also change the JavaScript to
I
do
just
anything.
mean the service is expecting the request to be made at some point.
I mean, there's many problems, I think, with any kind of client-side code, that things can be changed and updated at any time. And I am of the opinion that if somebody is messing with JavaScript in somebody else's website and it doesn't work for them or the other site, then it's really them losing out and it's their problem. If you're going to delete your requests because you never wanted them to use, if you want to clear out your index DB or change your cache around because you know how to use DevTools, then you go ahead and do that. I'm not going to worry about it on my server side.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. I guess that is time, so thank you so much for joining this afternoon.
Thank you.